Great to talk with you.
You too, brother.
So I just wanted to say right off the bat, Warrior is one of my absolute favorite movies of the last decade, and it is my go-to movie to recommend to people 100% of the time. When I recommend it, people always come back positive on that film.
You don't win this fight, you don't have a home.
Oh, I adore that. That's probably my favorite fight in any movie ever, where it out-Rockies Rocky.
I know.
And so much of it even is that one fantastic line.
I know, it's great, it's great.
So with Werewolves, when I saw the trailer, I thought, Frank Grillo shooting a minigun at werewolves, I'm sold. I'm a pretty simple guy. My wife, who doesn't like horror movies at all, she was interested because of kind of the fresh werewolf mythology.
Right.
What drew you to the project?
That same as your wife, is like it was just a fresh take on it. I'm always looking, especially in genre movies, to find something original. Because we've seen the werewolf movie done with the one werewolf over and over again. And that right off the bat, I was like, this is great. I keep saying it. It reminded me of Purge Anarchy with werewolves, and then the practical wolves. Like he was making this movie with practical wolves. And I was like, how are you doing that? And then he told me who was making the wolves. And I was like, oh, wow, this is serious. And I was, it was an easy yes.
So you kind of touched on actually exactly where I wanted to go with this, that so many of us saw the trailer and immediately went to what you just said of, oh, it's like the Purge, except with werewolves. That's awesome.
Right.
And they're practical. And those are so much of the movies that I feel like we're missing these days. Like, what was that on set, kind of working with practical effects and everything like that?
It was amazing. We had these performers. They were all 7 feet tall. And there's these, they came out in these costumes that were made by, some of the best guys in the business. And at first you kind of like a little awestruck. And then we started acting with them. And these guys were not just guys in costumes. They were performers. So they scared the shit out of me. Like, I have a scene where I'm under a car with Katrina Law. I mean, I was afraid, as if they were going to reach under and snatch me. So, I mean, whosever idea it was to do practical wolves and to make it's genius. And I think if you watch this film and you don't take away that element and go, wow, at least they whether you like the movie or not, you got to understand what it takes to make an old school movie like this with practical wolves. And I'm, as just being a part of the movie, I'm really proud of the film.
Watching it, it reminded me of all of these movies from the 80s and 90s I grew up with. It called back to that, like both the action, building tension, where when you're under the car, you're like, all right, what is about to happen? Or like, something's outside the house, but when's it going to pop out? And that's what I enjoyed about the film, that it did combine all those elements.
Yeah, and Steven has a great skill and a gift, really, to keep that tension from the beginning of the movie right until the end. There's very little chance for you to kind of take a breath before you're up in your seat again, and that's what makes movies like this great. That's what makes people like this want to see. That's what makes people want to see movies like this. Is that sense of I'm not going to get a minute to relax. Yeah. And that's not easy to pull off. He had a lot going on the set with all these practical wolves. There were a lot of them. All the guns going off, all the cars, and all the screaming. How he did this, I tell you, I have no idea.
This reminded me of all those mid-budget action movies I grew up watching that made me love films. I know you kind of were part of Champion trying to get more movies like this made with your WarParty films.
Yeah.
Why do you think it is that Hollywood doesn't create and theatrically release movies like this as often anymore?
That's a great question, and I'll tell you, Joe Carnahan and I, we sat down with every studio in town, and we had an idea about making movies $15 million and under, and blah blah blah, and the studios say the same thing, and they say, well, it's not theatrical. We're like, no, it is theatrical. You need to spend $150 million. And we're telling you we can make 10 movies for $150 million. They're not interested. So you have to find, and it's been even harder since the strike is over. It's been even harder to do this. But you have to find producers that get it, like Miles Nistel, our producer, and they're willing to kind of get the money and make these great movies. By the way, when I watched this movie, I watched it on the big screen. It looks like a $50 million movie. It looks like a $50 million movie. And so who's to say what's theatrical and what's not theatrical?
Right. Like it has a scope and size to it. One final question. Can you tease anything about what James Gunn is cooking with the DCEU that we should be excited about?
Oh, man. By the way, everything he's cooking you should be excited about because the whole DCU is tied into each other together. Everybody's crossing over and it's the same actors. You know, I'm in Creature Commandos. I'm in Peacemaker. I'm in Superman. And all the same people. You're going to see all the same people. And he's got such a fresh take on the whole universe. You not believe what's going to be coming down the pike, and wait till you see Superman. Wait till you see Creature Commandos. This is all James Gunn's brain. So I'm excited and grateful to be a part of that as well.
Thanks so much for your time. It's been great talking to you. As someone that loves these old school practical action movies, this movie was right up my alley, but my wife liked it too.
That's
which
great.
I think that testifies like you made something that has some broad appeal. Thank you so much for making the film.
Thank your wife. Thank your wife for me.
When did you get involved in the project and what drew you to this specific project?
Yeah, I was involved pretty early on. The script was kind of circulating around, Hollywood, and I had some people hit me up saying, "Hey, we think this is something you would really love." And so I read and it almost immediately latched on. I fell in love with it immediately. Matthew Hackett, the writer, he did such a great job with the script. And I also felt like the werewolves were things I haven't seen before in this kind of environment. And them getting all of the attention they were getting in the script also made it more appealing because usually it's like one werewolf or, attacking a house or a little town or whatever. But the amount of werewolves we got in just a small amount of time, to me, hit home really quick and I loved it. So I jumped on as fast as I could and tried to find some people to snatch it up for me and help me get it made.
So watching the trailer, one thing a lot of people said, and they said it favorably, is this feels like The Purge with werewolves. And
Sure.
then even in talking with Frank last week, he said that's one of the things that drew him to it. He goes, "What's like the Purge anarchy with werewolves?" How aware of you in the development of the film? What was that kind of on your mind, or is that something that just kind of came out afterwards that it just had a little bit of that same flavor?
No, it had that flavor from the first read, and Frank's not wrong. He said that to me the first time we talked. He said immediately after he read it, he was like, "Steven, this is The Purge with werewolves." And I said, "You're right." And we actually had to actively try to make it not so much The Purge with the werewolves, so because we didn't want to step on those toes too much. But it's such a great idea that was easy. The elevator pitch, that was what we were saying when we were out with it. Frank was saying it the entire time we were shooting of how he felt about it. I mean, and also it helps with Frank in it that it just, adds to that mythos of what it is, right? So, we knew from very early on that that's what it felt like, and it just seemed like an easy comp.
Mm-hmm. And to what you just said in there, what were those little things you wanted to do to make it stand out besides the obvious fact that it's filled with werewolves?
Well, I think the biggest things we wanted to do was give the werewolves personality. To me, that was something I had not seen in werewolf films before. They're usually pretty straightforward. They look very similar. So to me, it was like, how can I give each werewolf its own personality? Decide, because of who they change from and where the person that they were changing into a wolf, how can I sort of infuse that personality into each wolf? So that was something that to me really separated the movie from its predecessors.
Mm-hmm. And to what I mentioned at the beginning of this about my wife, she's never watched a Purge movie. She's never had interest in watching them. And legitimately, whatever that allure is of werewolves, that was the hook to bring in my wife and kind of this whole new audience. Diving into, like as I said before, what she dug about it is the film kind of does have this bold, different new approach to werewolf mythology. Not only is it multiple werewolves, it's that everyone is a werewolf and there's this genetic thing and, changes in the world cause everyone to kind of turn into werewolf in moonlight. Kind of what inspired that creative shift? How did that impact the way you approach the story and even to what you just said, develop the characters in that?
Yeah, the writer had such great, strong ideas about how that was very early on. And we were constantly in talks. I mean, even when we were doing early rewrites of the material with him, we were in contact obviously daily to make sure that that sort of mythos was grounded. It felt realistic. It almost felt like a virus. And to be honest, it was sort of hitting right at the time. We got the script before the pandemic, and then the pandemic happened, and we were like, wow, this is just sort of feeding into what we were already doing, which was wild. And so to kind of keep that in mind while we were shooting it was a big part of it, to try to feel everybody had sort of understood what it was like to be, shut down, shut in, something's happening in the world. And so it was easy to sort of feed that into the shooting of the movie because it felt so real. And that to me is something that felt different for a werewolf film to feel real, because there's such a extreme character that I don't know that everyone feels that this could happen, but for some reason this movie made it feel like it could happen because of what we had just gone through.
So like last year I did a video where I was kind of talking about top werewolf and vampire movies, and it was surprising how far fewer werewolf movies there are compared to vampire movies, in particular, like the big iconic ones. There weren't nearly as many as I thought there were. Which specific werewolf movies influenced this film, or just kind of genre speaking in general? What kind of inspired some of this?
Yeah, Dog Soldiers was a big one because I felt like that was one that really mixed the action with the werewolf pretty heavily, and the look of the werewolf was so great. Obviously, The Howling and American Werewolf in London were big influences as far as 80s genre that I was trying to go for. But Underworld was a big one too, because I thought what the first Underworld did in that movie was really give werewolves on-screen time that had not really been done. I mean, we saw the werewolves in that movie 90% of the time. And I love that. And so to me, that was something I was trying to accomplish with our film, was really give the werewolves their due. Because like you, I hadn't seen that many big werewolf movies that come out just focusing on the werewolves. The humans have their thing, and that's what we get, one werewolf kind of moaming around. But this was like, how can we get the werewolves to be the stars? So that was something that we focused on.